I'm a big fan of actually making some inroads on reducing our demand or reducing our focus on petroleum energy. And the reason why I am a big fan of that, in particular to all of the things um, that people have been doing in terms of switching to solar panels and things like that, is probably not exactly the same reason that everybody else is. Um, and I want to talk about that. So, if you don't know me, I am Professor Dave Mastak. I'm an associate professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship, and I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can. There's so many people to help me out that I want to pay the favor forward to help you out as much as I possibly can. You know, the biggest reason that people focus on, switching to a different energy source than mainly from petroleum sources is climate change. And that is a really, really big issue. And it is really scary if we don't do something about it. Virtually, the evidence is concrete at this point. It's almost like a law at this point. If you look at it, it's pretty staggering in terms of the evidence of, CO2 emissions that are caused from industrial production, which they can track, by the way, and separate CO2 from sort of regular CO2 from industrial production CO2 in terms of carbon dating, or looking at the radioactivity of carbon. And if you look at stuff like that and you look at the sort of trends, if it didn't lead to CO2 emissions or carbon in the air didn't lead to climate change. And, that's the variable, right? Is that we're just putting a bunch of carbon in the air. It still is spectacularly awful in terms of that carbon that's being produced in the air. And it's bound to lead to other things that are unintended that, that we have to be aware of. But ultimately, so the climate change thing is very much a real phenomenon. If you just look at, temperatures and changes in temperatures and all that kind of stuff, we're hitting historic lows or historic highs and lows repeatedly year in and year out in almost every geographic region. All of these kind of things, we do have an impact on our environment, right? We live in a fishbowl. The world is the fishbowl, and we do have an impact on it. There's only so much that you can keep putting out before you make a difference with what's going on, right? And basically, we're reaching the limits based on the technology that we actually have available of population limits based on the technology that we have available, and that's going to continue on until we start making some changes with that and reducing carbon emissions by switching from a different alternative or to a different energy source. And if you look at history, we've switched to energy sources many times. From basically like human energy where we didn't have a fire, then to using fire, and then to using like we're using wood fire, I guess, using things like the ocean, waterfalls, and then coal, and then until the last one using more petroleum energy sources. And the reason why we use those sources is because they're cheap and easy to access, right? Originally, that was the reason. It was like petroleum is messy and dirty, and nobody wants that on their land, so let's burn it. And that is actually the reason why I actually think we need to switch, is because we as human beings are terrible at understanding our environment. And here we are, we've got this source of material, this sort of elemental source that is millions of years old, and we're virtually just consuming it and turning it into something that we'll never get back. So if we ever think in 100 years from now, 200 years from now, 300 years from now, of an alternative way to use this valuable source of material that we have, petroleum, and we think of a new way and a new use of it that, I don't know, makes us all fundamentally better off, turns us much more happier, just completely changes everything. We do not have access to that, and it will look incredibly short-sighted in 30 and 300 years from now. Now, on the other side, you might be thinking, well, wait a minute, that doesn't solve the climate change problem. And that is true. But what I bet on is human ingenuity, right? So eventually, the Earth, and it's a very short period of time. I don't know what the prediction is, but a couple hundred years, all water on Earth is supposed to hit a boiling point. We sort of don't do anything. And, I fundamentally believe that it will get hotter and hotter and hotter. And so there will reach a point that things will just become so terrible that all energy, all resources are going to be devoted to solving this particular problem. And it's actually going to become economically prosperous for anybody to solve this particular problem beyond the sort of switch from energy, right? So pulling carbon out of the air, for example, doing things that mitigate pollution that goes into the air. All of those things are going to become fairly profitable as we start recognizing this particular problem. And, they already are, right? This is actually transforming. People are starting to recognize that this is a profitable industry to get into. And so they're going to get into it, right? Because, so Walmart doesn't want to be, a large polluter, because they know that their customers will recognize that, or at least a significant portion of their customers will recognize that, and they'll want to pay for pollution reduction. It's the same thing as cosmetics companies not wanting to show that they actually test on animals. It's not, there's still, there's definitely cosmetic companies that probably do that, test on animals, but not a lot at this moment, because there's such a demand for not doing that, right? That's exactly what's going to start happening. And we see that over time, right? It's a gradual process. It's not something where it happens overnight. All of a sudden everybody decides that, but it's a gradual process. We're already seeing that. Localized areas in particular. So this sort of pollution mitigation is definitely going to get better, but then as well is that there's creative people, really smart people that are going to pull all this pollution out of the air. And now, I'm not just saying that. There are people that are doing that, and there'll be more and more people that are doing that as we sort of move on. Are they doing it quick enough? I don't think so. But it's still an issue, right? Or it's still being dealt with. But the critical issue that nobody's talking about is the fact that this is a resource that we're virtually just burning up and turning into something that is not possible to reuse in the future. And I think about a lot of things like that. We consume resources on this earth that are just virtually, you can't get them back again, right? Different rocks and elements, and think about that it's actually pretty alarming, the rate that we're actually consuming these particular resources that we will never get back, because it's hard to get those back. You can't put a granite rock back together again once you cut into it or you mine all of a particular source. So we have to be cognizant of that. And I think that's the critical issue, in my view, is that we're depleting a resource that we'll never ever get back. And it will be, if we want to get it back, it will be extremely difficult to actually get that back. And then what if in the petroleum that we're mining, because all of this is really done in a very crude and a very crude way, right? They're just virtually just scooping this stuff up in great big trucks or pumping it out of the oil, out of the ground. And it's very crude. What if there was something in there that was a very valuable mineral that we will never get back because they're going through this and sifting through it in such a crude fashion? So I just want us all to sort of think about that as energy consumption. It's far easier to move away, or it's less consuming of these valuable resources if we simply just switch to something like solar panels or solar energy, as well as all the renewable energies that are there, like wind energy. So, this is something that we have to think about and really start sort of pushing towards. And it's a difficult problem because it's a diffused problem, right? We don't necessarily know, or none of us are sort of turning that switch on, the energy consumption and where it's coming from. Yes, you could put solar panels on, but they're terribly expensive, even with rebates and all of those kind of things in your various different countries. They're still very expensive. And so it's not an easy solution, but we have to have this open conversation and start recognizing, political actors that actually do worry about that and do think about it. So with that, that's all I wanted to say. Take care and have a wonderful day. Bye.